We'll start.
I should have
Gents,
asexual.
phone on telephone and pilot mode, please.
Yeah, we'll start. So, it's Parshas VAYIGASH, and I just warn anybody who's listening on, because I know as I look around the table, the warning's not necessary here, but for anyone who's listening to tape, I see that we learned this mimer in 1991 and in 1997. So for anyone who remembers it off by heart, I hope this won't bore you. We're doing it again. It's the first. It's much of the mimer. Much of the mimer I'm going to leave out and replace it with two sikkahs from the Rebbe, but it comes from, so that anyone who wants to look it up knows, it comes from Parshas VAYIGASH in Torah Oya on page 86, the first mimer. Okay, so what we're going to be addressing, just so that if I can take you through to the end first, what we're going to be looking at is two or three related concepts which are very much misunderstood. One is the concept of tshuva and atonement. The second is the concept of how we learn reward and punishment, the offshoots of which are love and fear for Hashem, which we'll come back to. And finally, the concept of Jews as the chosen people, and I'm going to deal with that first because of the criticism I got from last week. I think it was last week or the week before. I got an outraged email from somebody who said that I was making up my own Torah and that what I was saying was not representative of Jewish learning and Jewish tradition at all, and it has no place without me saying that it's my opinion. And I have to put it on record with everybody that not one word that I say is my opinion. I'm here to teach the Rebbe's Torah, and everything that I try and teach is directly taken from the Rebbe. There's no Kremnizer. It's all Chabad Hasidus in its absolutely purest form, and any suggestion that I'm adding my opinions to things is just nonsensical. My opinions aren't worth adding. I'm not saying that out of any false modesty. It's the simple truth. They're not worth adding. And what I say in here is the Rebbe's Torah, and I'm going to prove it to you. So what I said, and this is what I was criticized for, and funnily enough, somebody took me up on it at the end of this year as well. I said that there is a diseased way of learning, that we are the chosen people. There's a diseased way of learning that we are the Am Segula. There are a lot of Jews who hardly keep anything, hardly do anything, and they think that by the term Am Segula, that they are in some way intrinsically better than their neighbor, and that this is a concept of superiority. And I explained, as I often do, that is a perverse way of learning. We learn that we are the chosen people in terms of responsibility, that we've been given a job to do at Mount Sinai, to be Hashem's shluchim, to bring ruchnius into gashmius, to bring spirituality into physicality, and elevate physicality into spirituality. And with that comes a special responsibility. And it is that responsibility that differentiates us from other people. It's not a superiority of which a Jew can live an indolent, non-responsive life to his obligation and then claim some kind of superiority, just because there are more Jews who got Nobel Prizes than others who've got Nobel Prizes. And it's not like we've got a football team and everybody goes to the football and they cheer, and then when they come out they say we won when they didn't do anything. I mean, it was the footballers who won, but they identify with that, and we won. Well, that's not the game. The game is that each Jew is empowered and entrusted with a responsibility, and that makes him Yom Segula. So I was told in this email that I made that up. So instead of, I'm not trying to rub the poor guy's nose in this, I just want to go on record so that everybody knows what the truth of that is. So I'm going to quote to you from a letter which is written in English by the Rebbe in 1973, December 26, 1973, and very uncharacteristically, the Rebbe actually says to whom it's addressed, and it was addressed to a Dr. Yitzhak Isaac Moskowitz of Long Beach Boulevard in Long Beach, California. And this is a letter that's in English, and if anybody doubts that it's true or exists, they can email me and I will send them a copy. In that letter, which is a long letter, the Rebbe says the following. I'm going to read you the Rebbe's words. These are the Rebbe's words, right? When God made us the chosen people, this is also something of which we need not be ashamed. For contrary to those who misunderstand or misrepresent this in terms of privilege, which smacks of chauvinism, this chosenness is primarily a matter of duty and obligation to be a model people for the whole world to emulate. A people whose form takes precedence over matter, the spiritual over the material, and the soul over the body. A people which was destined to be a light to the nations. Then the Rebbe goes on to say, it is sad indeed when instead of being a model and a living example for non-Jews to emulate, some Jews fall over themselves to emulate non-Jews, rejecting the spring of living waters, the Jewish Torah and the Jewish tradition. So you can't tell me that the Rebbe is saying there that we can be proud of the fact that we're Jews without being conscious of the responsibility and the duty of being Jews. So I just want whoever it was, that person, to hear that clearly. So, by the way, I sent him a copy of the letter. So let's go to the parashat. Everybody knows where we are in the story. Yosef's been sold by his brothers who wanted to kill him. Let's understand his life. At 9 years of age, he's orphaned from his mother. At 18 years of age, his brothers want to kill him. They throw him into a pit instead. They then sell him to the Ishmaelites. He then becomes a slave in the house of a man called Potiphar. He then excels in his job, only to be thrown into prison because he was framed by Potiphar's wife, and he lives there in prison under the most sordid conditions, only to rise to be the second most powerful man on earth. And the story is at the very end of Yosef's, the account of Yosef's life, where, or not the end of his life, but he is at the point where he's already the viceroy, the second in command, and his brothers come to Mitzrayim to get food, and he then puts his brothers through various modes of suffering. That's the only way you can really describe it. And then softens the blow of that suffering by requiring to take Binyamin, his actual only brother from the same mother, and he then says that he's going to keep him, and his brother Yehuda steps forward and says, well, if you do that, I'm going to fight you, and all the brothers were behind him, and they were prepared to risk death rather than lose Binyamin to Yosef, who they didn't know was his brother. And that whole story is really the springboard for understanding certain currents in one's own life. And without that understanding, there are many things where we go through life experiencing various incidents, and you don't see the texture and the color of what's happening. So just as an overview, what is happening is this, that we have, as part of our spiritual experience, the understanding with learning Hasidus that everything is by Hashgacha Pratis, everything is by divine providence. And we learn that no matter how confusing it is at the time, or even painful at the time, ultimately it's for good. And this is borne out, this story is code for that dynamic. This story is code for understanding that if they didn't want to kill him, and if they didn't throw Yosef into the pit, then they wouldn't have had the option of selling him into slavery. If he hadn't been sold into slavery, he wouldn't have been thrown into prison. If he hadn't been thrown into prison, he wouldn't have been able to interpret the dreams of the butler and the baker. If he hadn't done their dreams, he'd have no opportunity to explain Paro's dreams. Then he would have, by explaining Paro's dreams, he became the viceroy of Egypt and became the most powerful man on earth besides Paro. And then we have the whole learning of the mystical sparks which have to be elevated, and they were. I don't think we'll have time to get there, but if we do, I'll try and get back to that. But all of this happening, and let me tell you a great hint. When you want to see Hashgacha Pratis, you go over your life on rewind. That's the way to identify it. It's very hard to see Hashgacha Pratis as you're living it, as it's unfolding, although tzaddikim do, and Talmidei Chachamim do. It is certainly not only possible, but it happens to some extent. But if you really want to see it, you see it by playing the video on rewind, the video of your life on rewind. And you realize that you're in this position because of that happened, and that happened because of that. And we're going to come to that very shortly with the whole Purim story. When Purim happens, that the whole unfolding of the Purim miracle is really an unfolding of this concept of Hashgacha Pratis, which causes events to unfold, and that ultimately they are always for the good. But at the time, they don't feel good. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But so the brothers, when they're confronted by Yosef identifying himself, they're very frightened. Why? Because naturally they're scared. Here's the most powerful man in the world, and he's going to seek revenge. And in fact, he has. He sent them back, and he put money in their bags, and then he put his goblet in Binyamin's bag, and that brought him back. And Binyamin's accused of stealing his super precious goblet and all the rest of it. And they're very scared. They think that he is going to seek revenge against them for what they did to him by selling him to the Ishmael. And Yosef says this to them. He says, don't be scared, don't be frightened, because, and when you analyze this piece of Torah, there are two things that are being played out. First of all, he says, don't be scared because you're only pawns. You're only pawns in Hashem's Hashgacha Pratis to bring me here so that I can bring you here, so that you can bring our Father here, so that the Golus can begin. That's the first aspect of it. The second aspect of it is that you've got nothing to be scared about because you haven't done me any harm. Why haven't you done me any harm? Because you can't. Now let me tell you, this is one of the most difficult things. You hear this as words. You can learn this from morning till night as words, but to make this personal das, to make this a personal level of understanding that actually changes your outlook on life is very difficult and requires a lot of practice. But the Alter Rebbe explains clearly, over and over again, in Tanya and in Maimorim, that nobody can hurt you. Nobody can bring you to any level of pain or suffering that they are orchestrating. I'm going to have to explain that very carefully, but let's just start with the first piece. All that a person can be is the messenger. It's like you're getting mail. You're getting mail from, you're getting a parcel from Brisbane, and it's delivered by a mailman, and the mailman is delivering the parcel. Now, to blame the mailman for the parcel is as stupid as it is to blame the brothers for bringing evil onto Yosef. And we don't understand that in our daily life because it's counterintuitive, it's contrary to what we learn, it's contrary to every instinct of our nefesh habahamis that does want to seek revenge and does want to do. So why do we seek damages? We'll come to that in a minute. But let's just understand this clearly, that Hashem is directing everything that happens to you. Our free choice, Bechira Chofshis, is only limited to how we react to it. We do not bring the circumstances upon ourselves. Hashem brings it. Do we influence it? That's another chapter. We do. In fact, we are actually ultimately the architect of the Hashgacha Pratis that comes to us. But in terms of the Hashgacha Pratis that is coming to us at any particular moment, that is divinely orchestrated. This one's doing it rather than that one, that's his free choice. He doesn't have to do it. You're walking down the street, walking down New South Head Road, Double Bay, somebody's walking in the opposite direction, and he slaps you in the face. Right? Now, one's reaction is to seek immediate retribution for that. That's very understandable. I'm not saying that, but it's wrong. It's a failure to understand that Hashem has dictated that your face be slapped. That this guy chooses to be the messenger, that's his free choice. And therefore you have an action against him for damages because it didn't have to be him. But you are going to get slapped. So for you to blame him for slapping you is at a very subtle level an attitude of avodah zarah. Because at the end of the day, you're really taking the position that this man who slapped you is the ultimate cause of the injury. He's only the deliverer of the injury. So this whole story with Yosef and the brothers, when Yosef replies to the brothers and says, don't be upset, don't be scared that I'm going to seek revenge, because I truly see that everything that happened for the good, And you were instrumental in bringing that good about. So if you were instrumental in bringing that good about, what Tyler do I have to you? Why what are you scared that I'm going to do to you? Why? There's nothing to be scared of. Now that's a very difficult dynamic to live with entirely in your life. But let me tell you how deep and how far-reaching this attitude is, that we are told in Zohar, in Kabbalah, an incredible thing, that somebody who does you bad, you have to repay with good. Now this isn't two-bit Christianity of turning the other cheek and however they perverted it. This is the deepest level of emunah in Hashem that can possibly exist, because when somebody does you harm, he is actually the shliach of Hashem to bring you this harm, and this harm at the end of the day has to be for your good. Why? Because there's no bad coming from Hashem. So if Hashem gives you something that is bad in your eyes, feels bad, is painful, makes you suffer, are you grateful for the suffering? Of course not. But do you understand that that suffering is for your good? It depends on your level.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, it's better at the end of the shiur if you don't mind, unless it's...
No, I was just going to say, if let's say I was in a combat unit now in Gaza, and I got hit by terrorists, my obvious reaction is to fight back. Now, is a state of war different from getting slapped in the face in the street?
Okay, I hear the question. Can I come back to it?
Yeah,
because
yes.
I think we need some vocabulary together in order to address that question. And it's a great question because that's what we're living with at the moment. And at the end of the day, nobody's suggesting that the IDF pack up and go home and give all the Arabs terrorists a kiss, right? And say you're doing good for Hashem and you're Hashem's shliach. So I get the question, but we need some more information. So at the same time that Yosef is assuring them that there's nothing to be frightened of, he is putting them through a series of hoops which are designed to bring them to a level of atonement. The whole story with the packing of the bags with the money and the stolen goblet of Binyamin and sending them back and forwards and risking and Yehuda having to step forward and risk his and all the Shvatim's lives. What was Yosef affording them the opportunity of doing? They chose to be the shliach of Hashem, to send him into slavery, to introduce him to years of suffering. And we learn a very deep thing, again, another very deep thing in relation to atonement and tshuva, that Hashem, out of pure loving kindness, gives you the opportunity of going wrong again and again and again until you get it right. So let's say that you do something that you're a Jew, you know something about Torah and mitzvahs, and there's a mitzvah that you transgress. I don't care. Let's choose something not difficult. So let's pretend that somebody has a lust for chocolate cake. Right? You have a lust for chocolate. I'm deliberately trying to use something harmless because, if I talk about the real problems, it's much more difficult. So let's keep it easy. Then nobody will feel uncomfortable. So you have a lust for chocolate cake, and you promise yourself that you're never eating chocolate cake again. And tomorrow you go out and you and you eat some chocolate cake, right? Now, how do you do atonement for eating that chocolate cake? The only way you can atone for eating the chocolate cake is to do tshuva. So let's say chocolate cake was forbidden. You then have to do tshuva. So what does it mean to do tshuva? It means that you're in the same position again, with the same opportunity, with the same lust, and that instead of saying, yes, I'm going to eat the chocolate cake and eat the chocolate cake, you say, no, I'm not going to eat the chocolate cake, and you don't eat the chocolate cake. Right? That is real tshuva and real atonement. Now, to have real tshuva and real atonement, you need those ingredients. You need the same situation. You need So we learn like this, and it's counterintuitive. We learn that Hashem, out of his kindness, will keep giving that person who's failed another opportunity, and another, and another. So you get guys who will tell you in all seriousness, just my luck, every time I get a new car, I smash it up, or just my luck, every time I do. And you've heard this, there are some people that have never had this problem, and there are some people that have the problem every time. I've said this in the shir before, I'm sure, but my first teacher used the example of stealing from an insurance company. That you go overseas, you get robbed, you find out the insurance company are going to pay you back at 2/3 of the value of the thing, so you inflate the value by an extra third, so that it's all square. And you convince yourself that you haven't done anything wrong because they were going to rob you, and you're just getting the thing back. But in fact, you're al pi halakha, that is stealing, right? So what's going to happen? Next time you go overseas, you're going to get robbed again. Why are you going to get robbed again? Because Hashem is giving you the opportunity to now not inflate your insurance claim. But you do, because you learned how to do it last time. So you're really smart. So now you do it without even thinking. Now it's become a mitzvah to do it. And the next time you go overseas, you get robbed again. And you know people who go overseas all the time and never get robbed. Just my luck. Every time I go overseas, I get robbed. And every time Chaim Yankel, who lives next door, goes overseas, he doesn't get robbed. He hasn't got a better burglar system than me. We both have the same mezuzahs. Both our houses are protected, or lack of protection, in the same way. I keep getting robbed and he doesn't. And the penny doesn't drop. That it's connected with his refusal to atone. And this isn't a punishment to cause him pain. This is a punishment to offer him the opportunity for greatness, to be able to take his Yetzer Hara for the fact that to inflate the claim and say no to it. So I'm trying to get you to see this dynamic, that there is two things functioning here. There is the hashgacha pratis of injury